without realizing it, you are developing a lot of the skills that are then so important for leadership roles. What's the best way of helping to build relationships and rapport with other professions other than learning together?
Hello, Catherine. Thank you very much for giving us your time this evening. It's very nice to see you after all this long, tedious lockdown we've had. The purpose of these interviews is really to give us a chance to get some insight from you as the BCA President as to what you think of the profession at the moment and where you would like to see it going. It gives you a chance to explore some of the ideas that I'm sure you've got tucked away somewhere. So that starts off with the first question, which is, what do you consider it is that makes a good chiropractor?
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for inviting me to take part. It's a real honour to be alongside some of the names I've seen doing these interviews already. So I suppose when you think about what makes a good chiropractor, there's so many elements, and they can be varied depending on the kind of setting that you're in. There's always different skill sets that I think are important depending on the kind of style of practice you have and the setting of your practice. But I think there are some core things that really sit at the root of every good chiropractor. So for me, I think the first thing is a confidence. But that confidence has to be carefully weighed against, say, an arrogance. We want to avoid being down the overly confident route and make sure that that confidence is something that is fueled by knowledge and fueled by a real passion for what you do, so that your patients feel confident that you care about them, they're confident in your knowledge base, and they're confident that you're going to be applying all of that to their specific set of circumstances. So whether you're in a normal private practice situation dealing with normal general members of the public who are scared and nervous, you can bring those skill sets across to them, versus if you're sitting, say, in a sports club, that confidence will be fueled by something else. So I think being able to increase your confidence by building your skill sets and staying on top of the game all the time is really, really quite key. And I suppose empathy comes into that a lot. So if you can be empathetic to how that patient is feeling, to how their family might be experiencing this as well, I think that that kind of combination of empathy but confidence in knowing what you know, knowing when's the right time to, say, refer that patient, when's the right time to try something different, that for me is kind of the root of being a good chiropractor.
Good. Well, I think we'd all play that one. As far as what do you think it is about young people that you might want to look at if they were thinking about it as a career? What are the things that you would say to them? Obviously it's quite a lengthy training and quite onerous. So, those are the sorts, what you talked about are the sort of skill sets that qualified chiropractors need to be good at their job. But what would you think it triggers in young people to get themselves interested in the profession?
I suppose a real interest in people. I think if you care about people and how they live their experience of this world. So for me, it was, doing sport, and it was being interested in the injury that goes along with that. And I think if you've got an interest in the human body and how that functions, if you're interested in how injuries happen and how they might be kind of fixed and helped, that's probably something that kind of suggests that a healthcare route like chiropractic would be useful for you. But as you said, there's a lot of training that goes alongside this, which can look a little bit daunting, I think, for when a lot of your friends are going to do a 3-year course and you're off to go and do 5 years. That might seem a little bit scary at first, but I think if you really care about, the human body and being part of a profession that's going to help with all of those things, then, chiropractic's certainly something to consider. So yeah, I think an interest in people and the human body.
And it's the identity thing, I think, which is quite interesting. To be able to identify as part of a unique profession is quite an attractive thing for young people.
Yeah, I think that title as well that comes with that, it's like, being a lawyer, being a dentist, being a chiropractor, you're part of something that's bigger than just you and that patient. You're actually a part of, a professional identity that is a big community of people. And so you can really kind of take pride in that.
I think it's very good. So if you now look at the education provision in the UK, but also we're also looking at this globally, what do you think the future holds for chiropractic education going forward?
Yeah, great question. So I think the future of all education for me is going to come down to much more integration. And we've seen this with kind of all of the universities that are offering chiropractic programs. There's a real kind of drive towards making sure that we're not taught in silos. So it's not that, chiropractors learn anatomy one way and physiotherapists or doctors and nurses learn anatomy another. Anatomy is anatomy. So bringing together a lot of the teaching for me looks to be the future of what a lot of institutions are doing, which I think is fantastic, because what's the best way of helping to build relationships and rapport with other professions other than learning together? And if you know that, right, well, I learned alongside a sports therapist or a dentist or a physiotherapist, I learned anatomy alongside them. I know what their knowledge base is. They understand what mine is a little bit more. And it's just a really fantastic way of breaking down some of the walls and barriers that can be put up by that professional identity that we just talked about. Although I'm really proud to be a chiropractor, I appreciate that there are many other professions who have the same type of knowledge as I do in certain areas. So radiography, if you can learn that alongside a radiographer, a radiologist, then how brilliant is that? You've all learned something with and from each other. So for me, I think the future of education has to be done in that way. And the other thing that I would talk about in the future of education is talk about competencies. So I've been fortunate enough to be a trustee of a university in London for a long time. And within the Students' Union role that I had there, that comes across all the courses. So whether that's a sports rehabilitation course, which was a big healthcare course we had at the university I was a trustee with, they really shifted, and the students enjoyed that shift from based on hours, so a learning based on, right, you've completed X amount of hours of learning whatever subject it is, to being competent in something. So demonstrating that you have learnt it, but you've also understood it. Because sitting a test on something, I think, only gives you half the story on what that student knows. And you may be someone that's actually far better at demonstrating those things. So I think a competency-based education is also important.
And also, for a long time, the chiropractic profession has stood outside the mainstream healthcare provision. And if we're aspiring to be part of the whole healthcare team, being trained with other members of that team means that there's no longer a question mark over to our competencies, what we do. There's much more acceptance of where we are. And that certainly is the case in Denmark. And I think if we're going to learn anything, we should learn from that model as regards to that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So the third thing I want to explore with you is, what do you think institutions need to do in order that they can make the chiropractic training experience the best that it can be?
So I think each institution, we're so lucky in the UK with the number of institutions that we now have, each being quite unique in how they deliver their experience to students and the sort of courses that they offer. So if you look at some of the newer courses that have come up, they're very integrated into existing healthcare departments. So as you said, the students have got the option straight away to be learning alongside other healthcare professions and building up the knowledge of our profession in those students of other healthcare professions from day one. We've got institutions who've got, longer heritage and, longer years of delivering a chiropractic program. But I think we're so fortunate to have that variety in this country.
Good. Well, and yes, it would be very interesting to see how the new courses bed in and help that, because if that culture can be pervading across the whole of the provision, that would be a very good thing, I think.
Yeah,
I'm very
I agree.
excited about what the new ones have got to offer, which the old ones perhaps haven't been able to explore to date. So it'd be interesting to see how that works.
It will. From what I understand, so London South Bank University, for example, one of the newer institutions, there was a whole multi-profession class about identity and about understanding all those other professions that are within their department. And from talking with some of the lecturers there, it sounds like actually all of the professions represented seemed to really understand quite well all of the others in the room. So they felt that they're actually, whilst they had a very strong identity for each individual, they were able to come together and learn really quite effectively. And I think that's such a great future for healthcare providers, but for the patients of those healthcare providers, who are going to only benefit from the fact that they're able to work far more collaboratively together.
Well, yeah, and students and young people have very open minds for that sort of thing. And if you can keep the minds open as well as possible, that's a good thing. Sorry about that. I don't know what that was all about. Now, the next thing we want to explore is where we think, or where you think, the profession might be heading globally. So in 10 years' time, where do you think we might be, both principally in the UK, because that's your jurisdiction, as it were, but also globally? What do you think we might be aspiring to as a profession?
So, you know what, I reckon if you'd have been asked this question when you were in my position, you'd probably have some of the same answers, which I think says a lot about what we as a profession need to be doing, which is looking forwards. I think that we've been at forks in the road for decades and decades. You know, when I was a student, I heard that same phrase. You know, I'm sure when you were in my position as president, you probably had exactly the same thoughts. It's right. It's, you know, it's now or never, right? Which way are we going? What are we doing as a profession? Let's focus on something. And I think that really that's still where we're at. We're still really kind of setting our dial on where we're headed to as a profession. And for me, that I saw a quote recently that, you know, as long as we're, you know, fighting our own, we won't see the real enemy coming. Now, the real enemy here for me is not a, you know, a person or a place or a thing. It's the enemy of MSK burden. It's the enemy of, you know, public health on people and society. So while all the professions of, you know, within healthcare are all kind of, you know, trying to find their footing and work out what they are, patients and people are still experiencing this global burden of disease. So I think that collaboratively with all those other professions, really for me, the focus has got to be on really targeting public health and making sure that whatever you can offer as a healthcare provider, as a chiropractor, to your patients and to your communities, you're doing that with all the kind of the passion and the evidence-based, patient-centered kind of drive that you can, because there's so much scope for us to really have a positive impact on patients and on society that we need to just really harness that.
I think probably, I don't know whether you feel this, but the COVID-19 pandemic has actually focused policymakers on the need for the public to be healthy rather than waiting until they get sick and then go to the doctor to get cured. And that must play into that same narrative about developing the general health of the population. And I think we as a profession are probably very well placed to help with that. So
absolutely,
that's an exciting opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I think we've seen with BCA members, we've been kind of asking the questions kind of through the last couple of weeks about who you're seeing. You know, are you seeing people who can't access NHS care, so National Health Service care at the moment? And we know from our work within ARMA that there is a huge backlog of MSK care within the NHS setting that people can't access. So there are a lot of people that are on waiting lists and, you know, seeking other avenues of care. And I think it's been a real opportunity for the private practice sector to step up and be a real option for people. And I think that not just chiropractors, but osteopaths and private practice physiotherapists are also seeing this. And it's a real opportunity for us to step up and be counted and show that we can contribute to this global burden, and there's enough work to go around for everybody. You know, there are, you know, hundreds and thousands of people who are looking for care for all sorts of things. And if you go in and do the absolute best job you can in the area that you feel competent and able to deliver it, then everybody benefits.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's all about professionalism and doing it in the professional way.
Absolutely.
So if you go back to the chiropractic education, what do you think are the best tools for recruiting the next generation of chiropractic students? What should the profession, the BCA, but also chiropractors individually and the institutions be doing to promote recruitment? And that's not just about recruitment of numbers. It's also about making sure that there's a proper diversity within the student numbers. And I was very impressed by the diversity I saw the last time I went to lecture at South Bank. And I would love to see that diversity being spread. So how do you think we can do that?
Big task, isn't it? So it's about getting, you know, as you said, a nice variety of people, because the thing with healthcare is everyone has a preference on the type of practitioner that they might feel comfortable with, whether that's male, female, whether there are cultural differences that people feel more comfortable seeing people within their culture. And so we need to make sure that we as a profession are being able to offer that to the public, so that everyone feels comfortable and able to access a chiropractor. So being visible is probably the first thing. We need to make sure that we as chiropractors are visible to our communities, visible to the younger people that are considering healthcare as an option. And one way that we do that within our clinic is with work experience. So we're very open to having people come in for work experience, you know, see what we do, ask questions. And being a multidisciplinary practice, we always make sure that the work experience students see physio, they see chiropractic, they see all sorts of professions under our roof, and we encourage them to go and look at other healthcare settings as well. So always being an option for people. I think some chiropractors might get a bit nervous about being watched and they feel that they're being watched, but I can promise you, as someone who tried to get lots of work experience before I went to chiropractic college, you know, I'm not there to watch you, I'm there to watch the interaction, and you know, students want to see it and feel it for themselves. So I think that's a really important thing that you can do. But we know that a lot of chiropractic students come to the profession because they have either been patients or they know a chiropractor. We know that historically that's been the case. So I think we need to look at how we access those students who don't haven't seen a chiropractor, or their family doesn't see a chiropractor. And I know that you've done an awful lot of this yourself, Peter, but talking in schools, you know, going in and being a part of the community, talking to students about what you do, why you love it, the passion that you have for the people that you're caring for. If you go and you really show your true self to these kind of GCSE and A-level students, you'll get a spark in one of them. And even if it's just one student in that school that's never heard of chiropractic before, but thinks, oh, they clearly love what they do, you're going to inspire them. And I think by doing more and more of that each year, you're only going to get more people applying, and hopefully that will kind of broaden out the diversity that we have within the profession.
And I think the awareness of the word chiropractic and the understanding of what chiropractors do is getting better. If I look back to when I started, which is now nearly 40 years ago, chiropractic wasn't a recognized word at all. People didn't know what chiropractors did or anything, whereas now it's much more an accepted part of the vocabulary, and therefore that helps as well, because it's not seen as quite such an odd choice as a career, maybe, we hope anyway.
It's not the easiest word to say when you don't know what it is, chiropractic, before you've ever seen it. If you've only seen it written down or you've heard it once, it kind of doesn't roll off the tongue easily. But I think you're right. A lot of the PR and marketing work that we do within the BCA is kind of aimed at that. It's making sure that we're getting into both national press and news and bringing the story about what chiropractic offers to the healthcare sector in the UK, what chiropractic is. We try and make it very, very personal. So in the last couple of months, because of, the COVID pandemic, one of the things our members have really been keen on our support on is making sure that the public know we are starting to reopen, the steps we're taking to be COVID secure within those clinics, really indoctrinating a kind of a sense of patient safety, you know, demonstrating how that's important to us, what we're doing, why it's important. And I think putting that kind of the PR and marketing vibes out there does help with that, because it increases people's visibility of us, for a start, and simple things like radio interviews. So we had a program over the last couple of weeks where I did an interview on BBC Bristol. We've had people doing their local BBC regions talking about how to avoid back and neck pain when you're working from home. Something really, really simple, some nice advice that even if you've never heard of a chiropractor before, it's accessible advice. It's something that you can, really take on and do yourself. We as a profession have a responsibility, I think, to all be the kind of advocates for the profession and make sure that you're being a part of your community by providing that sort of help and service.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an absolutely key message that I like to think that all chiropractors saw themselves as advocates and ambassadors for the profession. And if we can instill that in the student body, and that's part of what I think that the universities need to do, is to encourage students to see themselves as ambassadors for the profession that they're going to join. And that requires quite a lot of pride if you're going to do it and do it well.
It does, yeah, and it's that confidence I think we talked about at the beginning. It's, confidence comes from gaining experience in those sorts of things. And I've been so impressed with some of the, the BCA student members we've seen speaking at other conferences and, going out and doing their own outreach as part of their course to promote who they are and why they love their program. And I think that, learning those skills as a student only helps to kind of increase that confidence when you're a graduate. Yeah,
well, that's been very good. Now, that's been very, very interesting. Do you have any other particular issues that you would like to discuss, thoughts you've had, or issues that you'd like to bring up that might be important for future consideration?
Yeah, so I want to make sure that the community element of our profession is really key here. So with more and more students coming into more and more programs, more kind of widely spread across the UK, which is a fantastic thing, I think our job as the association is to ensure that people feel connected to that community no matter where they are. Obviously with kind of some of the more established institutions, those lines are so much easier. And I suppose for me, it's making sure that the newer institutions feel just as strongly connected to the profession that's out in the outside world, outside of their bubble of university, where you're with your cohort and you feel nice and secure. I want those students to feel just as connected to the profession as anybody else. When I was a student, I felt so connected. I went to the ACC and I was BCA rep. I did all these things. So I felt very easily connected to what goes on in the outside world. And, it's been fantastic to work alongside all of the institution's course leaders to help us try and develop that. So really, it's for the students, I think, to know that if there are things you feel that you don't understand about the profession, we're here to answer those questions. We're here to explore that with you. We've got such a passionate group of individuals across our profession, from people like yourselves with SPCE, to the associations, the Royal College, the people that are involved really do care. And I just want to make sure that all those students feel that we're quite accessible to chat to.
Yeah. And that's also about including them in conferences and getting them engaged in what's happening. Because if they start to get engaged right at the beginning, then they feel they're part of the community, which is
because when I talk to patients, for example, if they've moved from somewhere else in the country or they've seen a chiropractor somewhere else, at the moment, 9 times out of 10, I know who that chiropractor is. I've heard the name at least because, there were only the 2 institutions when, that were kind of around for me. And, I knew lots and lots of the people, but that's going to become less and less likely as there are more institutions. But that's such a positive, isn't it? Because, a physiotherapist is unlikely to know everyone that was in their year group, whereas I pretty much do, including, people from the other institutions. So I think that, that is the challenge we're going to have, but it's a really exciting one. And I think you're right, conferences and events like that bring people together will be key for it.
And I think there are 2 other elements that I feel are necessary. One is that I think we need to keep on developing career profiles so that there is a clear projection that people can go through within their careers. So rather than just coming out and going into private practice and that's all they do, encouraging them to be involved in other aspects of the profession, so they've got a chance to develop their own confidence by building on their experience and also getting recognition for that. And that was one of the motivations behind the Royal College, of course, because that gave a tiering for people. But also it's about trying to encourage young people to think about leadership roles and how the young people in the profession can think about how they can contribute And because obviously those of us who are in leadership roles are only in those roles for a limited period of time by definition, because if somebody sticks in a role for too long, they become rather stale. So, we need to bring through the next generation, making them realize that there are leadership roles that they can fulfill. And I think that's that's not just important from your point of view at the BCA or the Royal College. It's actually important for the whole profession to realize that if one of their new recruits shows that sort of tendency, they need to be encouraged to talk about it and then possibly pursue it. So
yeah, I agree. It's not something that I certainly hadn't always considered when I was at university, but you know, if you're that person who is, you've gone and done a rep role, or you've been involved in your student union, without realizing it, you are developing a lot of the skills that are then so important for leadership roles. We because of the kind of age of our profession and the size of our profession, there are so many roles that need to be filled in that actually need development in terms of the skill set. So the skill sets that I try to use with my, more political roles, and looking at governance, looking at, clinical guidelines, all of those more kind of finessed areas, writing policy documents on risk assessment wasn't something that I learned at university. That's something that we've had to develop afterwards. But if you're interested in those roles and you're interested in giving back, as you say, to your profession, getting involved with associations is just the most important way to do it, and kind of earning that experience through being involved with committees and volunteering your time to get involved. You can gain so much, because without a next generation of leaders, where do we go from there? We need people to be kind of picking up that mantle, driving it forward, lighting that flame in all the other people around them, and getting the rest of the profession excited about what they do. A handful of us need to kind of step up and do slightly different roles, which may not always seem what you trained for. It's not what you spent 4 or 5 years at university training for necessarily, but in order to make the profession what it is, you do need people doing those jobs.
And it's also about having pride in the profession, isn't it? And feeling that that this is worth giving your time to, because it's all pro bono. Nobody gets much money for it. So it's largely about being sufficiently proud of what you do to want to talk about it. So anyway, that's been really, really enlightening. Thank you very much, Catherine. It's very kind of you to give your time tonight.